Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the latest edition of The Third Half. I'm Scott Hamilton. Today I am joined by Kent Bray. Now, before we start, I want to say something about why today matters. I say this a fair bit when I introduce the third half to people, that it's about what happens after the noise, after the bravado, the big job titles, ultimately all the pretending everything's fine, and the lessons therein. So today's conversation is one of those that I think really deserves a bit of time and care. So stop what you're doing and tune in. It's not therapy, it's not performance, it's really a human conversation about pain, about resilience, and about what it actually takes to keep going when things get really hard. Kent, thanks for being here. And for anyone listening who doesn't know you, how would you like to introduce yourself and what feels important for people to know about you as we start and get into this?
Okay, Scott, lovely to speak to you. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast. Yeah, so basically, I would say the best way I'd like to present myself is, so I'm an Australian, and I had sort of three areas of my life which I had high achievement in. So I was a rugby player. So I played for Australia Under-21s. I played for Queensland. I played for New South Wales. 1989, I played against the British Lions. I'm an Oxford Blue. I went to Oxford Uni, Oxford Blue at rugby, and I played at Harlequins and coached at Harlequins. So there was high achievement in the rugby space. There was high achievement as far as study goes because I left school and did a law degree and was a fully qualified solicitor for about 18 months. And then, as I said, after that degree, I went and did postgraduate studies at Oxford and did a one-year diploma there. So there was a high level of achievement there. Then the next phase of my life was up in the city as a foreign exchange trader at Citibank, and I ended up being a director of the bank. So there was high achievement in the workspace. The last part, well, the second last part really, the fourth part is I became a cocaine addict and I was addicted. I was doing extreme levels of cocaine on a weekly basis. And we'll get into why and my recovery and all of that sort of stuff. I was spending £80,000 a year on cocaine use. I dropped 5 stone and I ended up in a rehab. And then the last part of my life to date, which is probably, I would suggest, the most interesting, is what I do today. So seeing that there is a healing and recovery process that I went through and it worked for me, I got so intrigued by how a human being could heal and recover that I went and studied for 2.5 years, became a therapeutic counsellor, jumped on LinkedIn, thought I was going to help addicts and alcoholics. And the response from the community, LinkedIn community, was very profound. I got executives and financial people and successful people ringing me up saying, look, I'm not an alcoholic, I'm not a drug addict, but I need some help with, I'm a high achiever, but I am struggling. And I could really relate to that. And so for the last 4 years or so, I've been a counsellor and a mentor. And Scott, I've got to say, it is without a shadow of a doubt, the most fulfilling vocation I've ever had in my life, to metaphorically walk beside someone who has had a debilitating issue or a challenging issue, and for them to get some liberation, some freedom, have some revelations. It's just an amazing thing. And it sort of showed me that for a lot of times I was chasing prestige, status, money, materialism, whereas actually the real deep fulfillment in life for me now is the actual interactions with other human beings. That's where I get great fulfillment today.
Um, I kind of don't know where to start in some of this, Kent, to be honest with you. And I'm going to, as I usually do anyway, jump about a wee bit. And I want to go back to the start, and I will do that in a minute. But I want to ask you a question about the kind of work you do just now. Do you still feel it's a kind of uncovered disease or uncovered issue, and people don't talk about it? Because I think we talk about the not talking about it a lot, that there's a lot of people who need health, and especially, as I sit and look here at your video, and we're not that different in age. We're both balding and wearing glasses and stuff like that. And I wonder whether it's a male bravado thing as well, that men in particular like to hide it away more. But so my question is, what's your experience been of actually uncovering more and more of this? And do you think people are willing to speak up more about the issues they face on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think that we have got a changing society. I think that stigma about if I speak up or if I make myself vulnerable, I will be perceived as weak. I think that that perception is changing, and I want to be part of the change. So you would have seen my stuff on LinkedIn. I'm very open. I'm very honest about my cocaine use and where it took me. And I know, I was one of those guys because of my ego and my pride and all that achievement that I had. I think myself and other high achievers think two things. One, we think we can get it done. I can sort this issue out myself. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, if I put my hand up, I will shred the public image of me through my family and friends, and so I want to protect that at all costs. And pointedly to your question, more men are now putting their hands up. But I think they're doing that because there are sports people in particular who get a lot of airplay because they are well-known sports people who talk about mental health, who talk about alcoholism, who talk about drug addiction, who talk about recovery. I think it is giving permission for more men to put their hand up and ask for help and to understand it's actually not a point of weakness, it's actually a point of strength to put your hand up and say, I just need some professional guidance here.
Yeah. And I interviewed Brian Redpath, Scottish International, before Christmas, and we touched on this a little bit. Again, going back to the start, back in the day, I mean, I didn't play rugby at any kind of level as you did, but looking at you now, I think I could take you down, by the way, but we won't go there. And we talked about it, particularly in the dressing room and stuff like that. You wouldn't open up. It would be perceived as being a sign of weakness, wouldn't it? And that kind of bravado and masochistic nature, macho nature, sorry, would just grow and grow and grow. So did you feel as if there was a point where you particularly felt off balance or becoming a bit more off balance, or did you just fall off the end of a precipice?
So the first thing is about that rugby environment. I love rugby. Rugby's given me so much. I've traveled all around the world. I've met some amazing people. It's opened doors. It's just a great network. But one of the things about rugby I talk about is delayed development in the sense of some of our emotional stuff. So if most guys will fall into rugby at 6 or 7 or 8 or something, and then they'll spend 2 decades, 3 decades, depending on how good they are, how long they last playing rugby. But there is a mantra that I'm not hurt. I am not hurt, and I will not show that I'm hurt. So we have we wear
Or hurting. Can I just,
yes,
sorry for
correct.
hurt or hurting. So hurt could be a physical thing, but hurting
Yep,
can be an
yep,
emotional thing. Yeah.
yeah. Well said. Perfect. And that's right. So and even if we as rugby players, even if we sort of venture into telling someone, we go, oh, listen, mate, I'm sort of struggling a bit at the moment. It'll probably be over a beer, and
Mm.
about 2 or 3 beers in, it'll be like, mate, you'll be all right. You'll be okay. You'll be fine. So we can only go so far with our rugby friends because of the stereotypical framework upon which we operate, which is you've got to be tough, you've got to be hard, you cannot show that you've hurt, you cannot show that you're weak, you cannot have a weak mentality. And all that is fine within the confines of the rugby environment. And then you add alcohol, which is, look, I've had 1,000, well, more than 1,000, I've had a ton of beers in my life, and it adds that social activity and that togetherness and that comradeship, and it's tight. But also you can hide in plain sight. If you are hurting, word you brought into the discussion, or you are struggling, and then you add alcohol to that, it's normally not a very good mix. But because everyone else is drunk and they don't see you the next day when you're full of anxiety, depression, etc., and then you turn up and don't tell anyone, and then there's this cycle going on. So the rugby environment is, whilst it's very, very positive in some ways, doesn't allow us to express our emotions and feelings for long periods of time, so that when later in life we're struggling with our feelings and emotions, it's very, very uncomfortable. We don't know who to talk to. With me, it was a slow burner with my drug use and my emotional state. So I got into my 40s and I was just using cocaine casually. But where it took off, and this is probably one of the most important parts of our discussion, is where my cocaine, there was a direct correlation between how my life was, the trajectory of my life, how I perceived my life going. I felt like I was going downhill, in the sense of I had a great job, I was earning a lot of money, I was financially secure, but I was struggling with life. I was struggling in the relationship with my girlfriend, the mother of my children. I was burnt out at work. I was sort of done with England. I was missing my family and friends. I was missing the sun. I was missing Australia. And because I had that rugby mask, role playing, acting mentality, I was always fine. Everyone calls, all my close friends call me KB, and they go, KB, you all right? Yeah, mate, fine. Everything's fine. Geez, mate, you've lost some weight. Yeah, mate, I'm a bit stressed, but I'm fine. I'm fine. And so my message to people out there is that there's always, before we go into coping mechanisms like alcohol and drugs and other stuff as well, before we go into, there's plenty of signs, there's plenty of red flags, and to be aware of those red flags. And it's like they call alcoholism an addiction. Well, they call the concept of addiction a disease, right? A disease of the mind. Now, I don't know if it's a disease or not, and I don't even want to get into that discussion. What I'll say is this: alcoholism and addiction, substance abuse, is horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. But like any disease, if you catch it early, it's easier to sort it out at early. Now, I went to the bitter ends and nearly died, and went into rehab. And then, and as I said, I'm 9.5 years clean and sober now. I haven't had a drink or a drug for 9.5 years. And I live very, very comfortably without, I mean, obviously you don't want to do any drugs, but I live very, very comfortably without alcohol. I have my 0% beers, feel part of, and I'm fine. So it was a slow burner, couldn't deal with my feelings and emotions, lent into the coping mechanism of cocaine, and then I crossed the line into addiction, where my body craved it and my mind obsessed about it. Now, at that point, a person is in a ton of trouble, because in my experience, you can't get back over the line into sobriety without the help of another person. That's my experience.
So thank you for that. And I was going to ask you, I mean, I guess that, listen, please stop me here, because I'm going into areas that I genuinely don't really understand. So if I'm
Ask
asking you
anything.
anything,
No problems. No,
okay,
everything's open for discussion. Everything.
did it become that the drink and the drugs were even more of a mask? So when you were struggling, it was another one, it was another one, it was another one. So that blanket actually became thicker, if you will, which is I assume a bad thing. And at that time, did you feel supported, or did you feel really isolated on your own?
Yeah, with the thing about support, I pushed everyone away and no one knew. I was a very, very, very extremely secretive user, because just going back to my introduction, my public profile, look, I'm not famous, I'm not well known, but in my mind, I was someone. I was a Harlequins rugby player. I was a director of Citibank. I'd been to Oxford University. I had a law degree. And so to some extent, I had to protect the public image of me to at all costs. So to be known as a drug addict was not going to happen. So I could not make that public. So there wasn't support, only because, excuse me, I wouldn't allow support. So to allow support, I would have to go to someone and say, mate, I'm in a ton of trouble here. I'm doing a lot of cocaine. and even no one, as I said, because of the secrecy, and all my really close mates were in Australia, I dropped all the Harlequins guys. I just dropped off everybody. I dropped out of all social circles. I wouldn't go anywhere where I was going to get rumbled and
Mm.
people were going, because I was addicted to cocaine. I did not want to stop. So with the support, there's no support only because I would not allow anyone into my inner sanctum.
Mm.
The sad thing about that, Scott, is that um, so many of my friends said, I feel really bad. And I go, why? And they go, I can't believe I didn't spot it. I'm so sad that you had to do that all by yourself. And I said, mate, don't worry about it, because if you'd tried to help me, I would have resisted it anyway,
Yeah.
because I was addicted.
Mm.
And that's the horrible nature of it. It's
And how
horrible.
long? And how long did you spend in that kind of almost isolated lockdown phase? Because that to me sounds like you're at the bottom
Yeah,
of the ebb now. You know,
yeah,
on your
yeah.
own,
So
lockdown,
I,
pushing everybody away.
I used cocaine for 20 years, but I would say the first 10 years there was nothing to write home about. It was just very occasionally. The last 10 years, the trajectory went upward for sure, but the last 3 to 5 years was just out of control. I
Mm.
mean, just to give you an idea of consumption, and just clarify one thing. At the end, I wasn't drinking any alcohol at all. I'd stopped drinking alcohol because my body was addicted to this particular substance of cocaine. So my body, I'd wake up in the morning, and as soon as my eyes open up, I wouldn't check my phone. I wouldn't go to the toilet. I wouldn't look outside the window, see what the weather was like. As soon as my eyes open up, I just go, how, when, and where am I getting my
Mm.
cocaine? So it was, yeah, it was tough. The question was, sorry, I just forgot the question.
No, it's like how long were you in that kind of
That's
real
right, three to
the
5 years.
yeah.
The last 3 to 5 years was pretty much total isolation. And I, just to give you an idea, that's right, to give you an idea of the actual amounts. So I was doing 20 to 30 grams of cocaine a week, sometimes 6 grams a day. Now, your average cocaine user will go out at night and maybe do one bag of cocaine or two. To do 6 grams in a day is literally like, that is
Mm.
very, very hard to comprehend. So 20 to 30 grams of cocaine a week would be like 30 to 40 bottles of wine, if I put
Wow.
it in wine terms. And as I said, all that demonstrates is, I would hope in the short period of time that I've been speaking to you, that you would think that I am a somewhat intelligent, socially acceptable human being. But this is where drug addiction and alcoholism takes you. I was nothing more than a garden variety drug addict, and I had to have that substance every single day.
Okay. So at some point something changed, either slowly, suddenly, epiphany, whatever, bang. What was that moment? And just tell me about coming back up the kind of the other side of the curve now.
Yeah, so 2015 Rugby World Cup was in Australia. I had some mates over from Australia. Sorry, 2015 Rugby World Cup was in England. Some mates came over from Australia, and they looked at me, and I meant to send you a photograph actually before we started this. I'll send it later. But just to give you some context of how I looked, well, in 2015, I wouldn't have been at my lowest. The lowest I got down to was 10 stone. So I'm 14 and a half stone today. But the lowest I got down to was 63 kilograms.
Wow.
And I could see all my ribs. When I went into rehab, I could see all my bone structure, and I had a gap between my thighs because I had no muscle, I had no fat. I was just skin on bone. I looked absolutely horrendous. But these guys turned up in 2015 Rugby World Cup, and from mates from Australia, and they just said, mate, what's going on? And I was with them for a week. Then I went home, and we went to the Rugby World Cup final. That was between Australia and New Zealand at Twickenham. And they just said, mate, look, they wanted to have an intervention. And I just said, like, what for? And they said, mate, you're going to die. And I said, I'm fine. I've got it under control, as all alcoholics and addicts do. They say that. And they said, please, they were like begging me almost, like, you've got to get professional help. You've got to get professional help. And then for the next 5 months after they left, I just tried to knock it on the head. I thought, well, got myself a law degree. I've been to Oxford University. I've been to Harlem, I was director of a bank. I'll get this done now. I'm going to stop this now. And I couldn't. I got it down to about a gram a day on some days, but I couldn't stop. I could stop for 2 or 3 days, but I couldn't stay stopped. So I went into rehab. I had 6 weeks in rehab, which was, I needed to be taken out of society and just put in a bubble and just, I got clean of coke and tried to get my mental state a bit better. Excuse me. And it was good. I obviously didn't drink or drug for that 6 weeks. And I came out, and after 8 days, I relapsed. And I ended up in a hotel I'm in Essex, and I'm just outside a place called Billericay, but at the time I was in a hotel down at Southend, and I was just going industrial on cocaine for 3 weeks. And I don't know if I was trying to kill myself or it was the last hurrah or anything. But then I had what they call a spiritual awakening, and it was it's one of those seminal moments of my life. And I'm just so grateful I had this moment. I was laying in bed. It was 3:22 a.m. on the clock on the TV. I'd just been to the toilet, and I laid on the bed and I just went, this is it. This is it. I just had this spiritual awakening, aha moment, light bulb moment, moment of clarity, whatever you want to call it. And I just thought, this is it. This is it. You're either keep doing this and die, because, Scott, what happens with cocaine use, it puts enormous pressure on your heart. Your body temperature goes up, and your heart's just going, like bang, bang, bang. I used to hear my heart sort of hitting my breastplate. I could literally hear it, boom, boom. And so you're at a high risk of a heart attack. And I just thought, this is it. And I thought, if I continue this way, I'm definitely going to die. That's a given. My weight was so low. My mental state was very fragile. Euphoric one moment, cry my eyes out the next, full of anger, resentment, guilt, shame, remorse, embarrassment, take your pick, just swimming in a cesspit of all of that. Or I give this thing called recovery a go, and I threw myself into Narcotics Anonymous. So Narcotics Anonymous saved my life. If anyone out there is having trouble with drink or drugs or gambling or overeating or anything, go to one of these fellowships. They're free, they're anonymous. You can walk in and you can learn about addiction and learn about recovery. So I went in there, and the miracle of my life is that I was using 20 to 30 grams a week. And then on the 17th of June 2016 was the last time I used cocaine. The 18th of June 2016 was my first clean day. And from that day to today, I've not picked up a drink or a drug. So it just goes, and that's what I said before at the start when I said, I just got really intrigued with that. Like once I sort of got a year clean and sober, I just thought the capacity for the human body and the human brain to literally turn on a sixpence and heal and recover. Then I went and read books, and I went and studied, and then I had the next spiritual awakening or epiphany, the word you used, I had was that I'm going to help people. I'm getting older. You referred to our age. I've been in the me game the whole life. I want to play rugby for Australia. I want to play rugby for Queensland. I want to go to Oxford. I want to play for Harlequins. I want to see the world. I want to be a director at Citibank. I want to make money. I want to have properties. I want to have wealth. I. And I ended up in a rehab. And so I thought, I want to give. I want my legacy to be, that Kent Bray wasn't a bad bloke. He helped some people. That I'd take that legacy over the rugby or the money or the Citibank thing any day of the week. Any day of the week.
So it's a massive move. Yeah. And did your confidence start to come back fairly quick? As I listen to you're forgive me, typical Australian, you're
I have been over here 30 years.
Yeah, I know. Well, listen, I've been down south of England for 35 years, and I'm still very Scottish. So did your confidence must have been shot to hell, right? And as you go and listen, I love this exploration, and we'll get into the giving back piece. Genuinely love it. But did your confidence start to come back quickly, or again, was that a slow journey back to feeling actually, not only do I have had the epiphany, I want to give back, but can I give back? Am I able to give back? And you've talked a bit about study and everything else, which is great. But how did your confidence start to rebuild?
Yeah, it's very perceptive. That is true. When you are a drug addict or an alcoholic, the self-loathing and self-pity is off the charts. I used to look at the mirror sometimes and literally scream at myself, just say, "What are you doing? Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!" Like just with real anger and visceral anger and emotion in my face because I just knew what I do was wrong, and it absolutely shredded my confidence and my self-esteem. And it did take a while to come back. The whole thing about just personal disclosure. I Things like you talk about confidence and self-esteem coming back and getting back to the person that I know I am, which is quite compassionate. Well, I am compassionate and caring, and I am a good person. But I was a good person making bad decisions back then. And things like relationships, it took me probably, I think it was about 3, maybe 4 years before I got into a relationship with a lady because the cocaine had literally physically, mentally, and spiritually destroyed me. I mean, I put 600,000 pounds up my nose. So financially, there was that burden, and it had to be a reset for me financially. Went through a divorce, etc., etc. So once I'd been sort of broken down into pieces, the reconstruction took, probably a year or 2 or 3 or 4, depending on what area you're looking at. Weight came back quite quickly in my first year. Mentally, I could feel myself getting stronger. My confidence came back. I didn't go back to the city because I got offers to go back to the city, but I didn't go back to the city, not because I was worried about drink or drugs. I just didn't want to go back to that environment. It was done. It was over. Then I had to find something else. But one thing that did take a while was my ability to be loving and caring and intimate with a girlfriend. And that took some time because I think, because of what the thread of this conversation, my confidence and self-esteem had just been shredded for so long. So it took a while, yeah, for sure.
And the so let's go on and talk about the counselling thing and actually that in itself. And I think there's a sense, a general public sense that counselling can be quite sanitized. What do people most underestimate about this work? Because I'm
Well,
genuinely intrigued.
yeah, it's just, yeah, you're absolutely right. Sanitized. Yeah, the words I use is that the perception is quite clinical and
Yeah.
quite, sterile sort of thing. Um, I would suggest you refer to me being an Australian. I've got clients who've had counselling before, and there's been times where there's been discussions had, and where they just volunteer. They go, "I've never had a counsellor like you in my life, ever." And I'll go, "Is that a good or a bad thing?" And they said, "No, it's really, really good." And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Well, you don't muck around. You get straight to the point. It's not wishy-washy, you know. It's very, if you like, Australian. Let's talk about this." And they said the other thing is that whilst I've studied and I will introduce modalities of counselling, I'm very, very what they call humanistic, which is I it has come to pass that I'm a very, very good listener, and I give space to
Mm.
clients and they're seen and they're heard, and there's zero judgment. There's zero criticism. Like I will have a client who will come to me and it might be a drug addict, addicted to drugs, alcoholic. I might have a client who's having an affair. I've got a client who, has, I don't know, done something. I don't really care what the person has done. That's not what I'm about. I'm not there to judge or criticize. It's about what do you want to do now. And so you are right. And clients will say to me, I've sat with counsellors and it's very textbook and it's very sterile. like I will invite humour
Mm.
into my sessions. I think to create levity, and it seems to be working. I just want to say, just to give an example of that. I've had a couple of things, well, not a couple, I've had a number of things happen in my counselling which have literally blown my mind. And one is, let me give an example, and I posted on LinkedIn today. I've now worked with a number of clients who have been the victims of sexual abuse. Females, largely females, but some males. And I feel comfortable talking to them. One of the things that I'm very good at is I don't get what they call transference. So your stuff is your stuff. My stuff is my stuff. So I'm here to help you and guide you and support you, but I'm not here to get involved emotionally in your stuff. So I'm good at like keeping you there and me here. I think it's come because of the fact I've done 750 Narcotics Anonymous meetings and I've heard some of the most harrowing stories, but seen people recover and heal from those harrowing stories. And I've heard some stories which are, I've cried. I've sat there in a meeting and tears streaming down my face as someone up on the top table is sharing about sexual abuse as a child. And they're so honest and so brave and so courageous. And I think to myself, like, wow, I get blown away. So I've found I speak to, I don't limit my clients are not just people recovering from addiction and alcoholism. It's an absolute full range of debilitating and challenging issues. But the getting back to the environment, this young lady, you know, I won't give her her exact age. I won't give enough information that she, if she ever listens to this podcast, she's not going to identify herself. But she was sort of, let me say, she was late 30s, and she's in a relationship, and she got abused by family member 12 to 17 or something. And she came in and she spoke to me, but she came in to say that she was a little bit unhappy in her relationship, wasn't feeling very well. By the third session, she said, I want to tell you something. I said, go ahead. And she said, I was sexually abused when I was young. I said, okay, well, let's talk about it. And I just gave her space and I never judged her. And she vented and we had 12 sessions and the transformation was quite remarkable. And I said to her one day, I said, listen, I want to tell you something. I told her about my story. I said, I want to tell you something. I said, I've been with leaders of industry. I've been with World Cup winning rugby players. I've been at one of the most elite educational institutions on the planet, at Oxford University. I said, rarely have I met a person who is as brave, resilient, strong, and courageous as you. I said, you are an absolute warrior. Because she's married, she's got a kid. I said, how you didn't slip into full-blown alcoholism, how you didn't slip into full-blown drug addiction, how you possibly didn't try to take your own life. And yet you stand here today, you sit here today and you're being so honest and brave. And I said, you are an absolute inspiration to, well, to me. And I've had moments like that. But moments like that, and I've been given a $2 million bonus. All right. Now, don't worry. I mean, it's good to get security. I'm not saying it's not. But as far as how I was emotionally moved and what it means to me as a human being, that experience with that lady was profound and moving and powerful. And I've had that with a number of women who've had sexual abuse and some men. Why am I saying this? I was the rugby player.
Mm.
I was a me, more, money. It's all about me, prestige and status. And I've found this niche, which is so fulfilling. And it just goes to show that life is amazing. Where you end up at times, it's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. And without leading you here, I think this is a really interesting point about when people turn up for the first time, they probably think they need something or they think they're suffering from something, or I don't know, they might not know what they know something's wrong, but they're not quite sure. Is this commonplace that you
Yes.
by your listening skills and like that, you'll help them 2 3 sessions, however many it takes to genuinely get to what's lying underneath? Is that how you see it
Yeah,
working
yeah,
more
yeah.
often in practice?
More often than not, whatever the presenting issue is actually masking or deflecting from something else. More often than not, we will find something else. Um, yeah, it is. That is true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And I do a little bit of coaching, professional coaching. I'm doing my calls and stuff like that. But it's, you're way in a kind of different place off the scale here. But we talk a little bit about creating a sense of discomfort in order to make people comfortable, ironically, and open up a little bit. Do you have to challenge people who want to
Yeah,
change? And then, how does that comfort, discomfort kind of paradigm shift?
yeah, that's yeah, good question. So I'm working with. I've actually worked with some Rugby World Cup winners, um, Australians and a South African guy, and worked with. I've worked with a number of Premiership rugby players who transition, and they're struggling. They're struggling to transition from the professional rugby world to what we perceive as the normal world because they've got structure and routine and they've got an identity and they've got a purpose and they're seen and they're heard and they've got adulation and love and all that sort of stuff, and they've got their tribe, they've got their comradeship, they've got the clubhouse, they've got comfort, they've got security, safety, and all of a sudden it just goes. And they're finding this new world and they're trying to find their feet in a new world. And when they struggle, they lean into drink and drugs. And I have to challenge some of those guys because some of that ego and pride is still there. And I've got to, say, listen, mate, we can talk about this till the cows come home, but unless you want to embrace change, unless you want to be brave and courageous and actually do some of what I call you've got to do the heavy lifting. You've got to do the heavy lifting. I can't do it for you. And so, yes, I do challenge them. I've got, just getting back to, I think, with the tone of the third half, the name of your podcast, I thought about this beforehand. And I think that with me, I'm in my third half in the sense of, okay, I'm in the last third of my life, but third half, I think it looks like this was to start with was the first half was education and sport. And the second half of that part of my life was working up in the city and earning money and property and whatever. Then that that second half became the first half where I transitioned from that, fell off a cliff and reconstructed myself, redirected, recalibrated myself to end up in this space of giving and mentoring and counseling. And when I look at a number of my clients, they are successful people. But what I believe to be true is that we are very much conditioned, modeled, and influenced for the pursuit, the chase. Okay. Whether that's money, whether that's titles, whether it's cups, whether it's premierships, we're conditioned. We're not really educated, influenced, modeled, or conditioned, influenced, modeled around the possession. So once I've won a cup, or once I've won a premiership, or once my career has been completed in rugby, or once I've got financial security, once I've got the wife and the kids, we sit there and go, what's my identity now? Who am I now? And that's what that tone of conversation comes up a lot with either ex-professional rugby players or ex-professional city people, financial people, high achieving people. They can struggle. When you say when the lights go off, and the game is completed and you're moving on to that next phase of your life, it is extremely challenging from my experience. That's where trouble can happen. That's where drink comes in, drugs come in, relationships break down. Okay, for example, you know, if you are an elite rugby player, you have an enormous amount of control and structure and demands on yourself. But I talk about this thing about crossing the thresholds. The demands you put on yourself as a rugby player or a person up in the city and the demands of everyone around you in those environments is not commensurate or productive when you walk over the threshold into a house with a wife and two or three kids, right? That mindset is not very soft. It's not really forgiving. And I think at times, I know in my relationships, I would demand, not demand, I would expect certain standards of, I don't know, just standards about all sorts of things. But what I came to realize at times is the standards that I was asking of someone else was the expectations of the standards that I'd built about myself for years and years and years. To put those expectations onto another person in a relationship, it's not a game of rugby. It's not the financial markets. That can be very destructive. And that was my experience in my life. So to tie all of that up, when someone comes along to me, I say, here's an example. I say, this lady carried your child, nurtured your child, brought that child into the world safely. And there's no love for a child than a mother's love for a child. And then she has supported you in your career. And, da da da. And when put a male in a female's shoes, so to speak, and give it a bit of a different perspective, and then talk about what works in the workplace does not necessarily work in the home place. That sort of rhetoric, you can see these guys go, I get it, I get it, and get it. And that's where I guide and help and support guys with that sort of stuff.
Mm. I'm going to bring us to a close shortly, Kent, but quick plug for yourself. How do people get in touch with you? You
Yeah.
know, just just explain, what your coaching practice is.
Yeah. So I'm
As you
all of
say,
my stuff is online. I've got clients all around the world in all sorts of jobs, vocations. They're at just about every country of the world, one way or another. So just find my website online, Kent Bray, Counselling and Mentoring. My main platform is LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I'm not so much on TikTok. So Instagram, Facebook, um, and Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You'll find me on there. LinkedIn is where I post most of my stuff. Find my website. There's an email address and a phone number there. Contact me. I'm online. The sessions just block an hour. The sessions go for 50 minutes. I don't block books. I don't say that you've got to do 6 sessions or you've got to do 10, you've got to do 12. I do my sessions how I do my life. It's got to be very organic. It's got to be open, honest, no masks, no role playing, no acting. Just bring your genuine, authentic self and bring a real desire for change. So, yep, Kent Bray Counselling and Mentoring, number of podcasts. Go on to Spotify, put Kent Bray in there or YouTube. There's a number of podcasts. Have a listen. And if you do not know, this is my plug, if you're sitting there and you don't know who to speak to. So you don't want to go to your father because you might appear to be weak. You don't want to go to mother because you don't want to let her down. Your siblings don't really understand. Your mates not understand. If you can't find a place, contact me.
Kent, I kind of don't know what to say. I've done about 15 of these podcasts so far, these interviews. My heart's racing at the moment. I'm going to be quite honest back with you. Back with you. My heart is racing at the moment. You've genuinely moved me just listening to you, and I knew how you were going to up here. So the first thing I'm going to say is thanks for trusting us with your story. Right, I do think it's amazing. And I think a couple of key things have come out for me. One would be there's hope.
100%.
Everybody should remember there is hope. You're turning around, and we went down to the bottom of the pit here to talk about this, and then we've come back up. So for people, there's genuinely hope, and I think that the final thing is there's help.
Well done.
And I think this is
Right.
again really important. So trust, hope, and help. Reach out, and forgive me that there's other counselling out there, and I'm sure you would, yes, you're here, but others as well. And
Yeah,
I think
absolutely,
just
100%.
people that are listening or watching need to understand that there is hope and there is help, and it's not uncommon. I think that's again become to realise that this is not an uncommon situation or uncommon problem for people to be having and wrestling with.
I think one of the bravest things that's one of the bravest things anyone can do is actually pick up the phone and speak to someone. I say that to all my clients. My first session, I go, well done. It takes some effort. It takes some bravery. It takes some courage. You're speaking to an Australian. You don't know me. You know nothing about me. And I'm going to ask you to get vulnerable. I said, that takes some bravery. So, yeah, get some bravery, get some courage, pick up the phone, get some help from someone.
Ken Bray, thank you very much. Love talking to you.
Oh,
Enjoy the
man,
rest of your
thank you
day.
very much, Scott.